Survivors and experts who describe their own experiences. All individuals appearing in this program represent and illustrate the general public only, and their presence in the program in no way reflects nor implies any involvement on their part in any dating or domestic violence situations.
Daddy's so stronger than Mom.
Girls don't have to be smart, just pretty.
Boys are stupid. My dad keeps my mom in line. I can't do that. I'm just a girl.
Boys rule.
He really likes it when I play down.
Shut up. What do you know? You're just a girl.
My boyfriend says I can't go out with you
You
guys.
can't do that. You're a girl.
If you don't have a boyfriend, you're nothing.
You better not talk to any other guys.
He really scares me.
She says no, but she doesn't mean it.
He's so jealous, he must really love me.
If you really love me, you'll do it.
He wouldn't hit me if he didn't care about me.
You're my woman.
It's my fault he hit me. I got in his face.
I own you.
We need to teach our sons and daughters about healthy relationships from the time they're very young. The earlier we start, the less likely they are to become part of the statistics on violence. Dating violence is a pattern in a relationship in which one person is repeatedly intimidating and frightening and controlling his or her partner. Estimates are that as many as 28% or 1/4 of teenagers experience violence in a relationship, sometime between the time they're 12 and 21. What we do know is the majority of the victims are girls.
Any adolescent can be involved in a violent dating relationship. They come from all walks of life, and often these violent relationships are going on right under the parents' noses.
There isn't really much of a difference between teen violent relationships and adult violent relationships in terms of what the violence itself looks like. The adult or the teen batterer may do almost exactly the same things in terms of threatening to hit or actually hitting, name-calling, mind-twisting, manipulations, accusations, interrogations. That behavior may be exactly the same for a batterer who's 15 or a batterer who's 40. The difference between teens and adults in battering relationships have more to do with what it means to be a teenager in a relationship.
Oftentimes, it may be the very first relationship that they're involved in, and because it is the first one, they may have a lot of confusion about what a relationship is, what it means, what is behavior that is considered loving, or they may not have an understanding of what is controlling behavior. So because of that confusion, they may not identify the different tactics right away.
So they may have kind of Hollywood ideas about what's a sign of love or how somebody shows love. And in actuality, what research has shown is that teenagers are more apt to interpret violence as a sign of love than adults are.
I was 20 when I met him. Through the whole relationship, he always treated me like I was just porcelain. It was just like my knight in shining armor. He was always wanting to be around me, always calling me, always wanting to know what I was doing, very concerned about me, thought I was the most beautiful, most intelligent person he's ever seen in his whole life. Left a girlfriend for me, saying that there's just no way any woman could ever compete with me, and he just had to be with me. This was his destiny, was to be with me. And that, to me, to who I was at that time, was incredible. That level of attention was so enticing. And it was something that he was telling me everything I've ever wanted to hear in my whole life. He always told me what to wear, always told me how to wear it. I bought my clothes, but he picked them out. My life was in his hands, and that's the way I wanted it, and that's the way he wanted it, because it was easy not to have to think about anything. I didn't think about anything.
At the center of violent relationships, we find a power and control issue. The abuser's goal is to gain power and control over a victim. And parents should be watchful for signs of their child being a victim by their adolescent giving up too much of their self to please the abuser.
The first signs of an abusive relationship or the potential for abuse in a relationship are often recognized in the form of the extreme jealousy and possessiveness that the battering boyfriend has towards a girlfriend. That can seem very loving at first, and after a while it becomes very restrictive. And that feeling of being afraid that if you do something that makes him unhappy, there's a threat somehow, that you're going to be attacked verbally, that you're going to be punished in some way emotionally, or that you might be hit, often is the beginning of a battering relationship.
The first time he ever did anything to me, we were arguing, which we did an awful lot. He sat up, grabbed me by the neck, and carried me across the room and dropped me. And I just fell on the floor, and I didn't know what happened. I started to cry. And he said, "You're not hurt. You're breathing. You're fine. Get up and don't ever, ever get in my face again." And I didn't. I learned my lesson very quickly. And I didn't tell anybody because it was my fault, is what I believed. He believed it was my fault. I believed it was my fault. So to tell somebody would be to admit that I'm really messing up very horribly in this relationship, and nobody needed to know that because we were the perfect couple. So that was the first time that I noticed that maybe something is wrong. And I ended the relationship. And it took me about 3 days before I went back. I went back because he went back to what he was, to that man that I fell in love with. And he can't live without me, can't breathe without me. It hurts when I'm not around, and he just loves me so much that he's just incomplete. And so was I. At this time, my family and my friends had stopped talking to me. They hated him. So what they did initially was what any mom of a teenager does is, "Oh my God, he's a horrible, horrible guy, you can't see him anymore." Well, okay, that does not solve the problem. That's the opposite reaction is I was like, "Oh yeah? Well, let me show you." And so I continued to see him. I was out to prove that I was independent from her and I did not need her.
When we come in like gangbusters, we want to take control and take charge. You're going to end this relationship. He's not going to be allowed to see you again. What's going to end up happening is that you're going to have a teenager, even though she's very frightened, that will rebel because they want to make the decision.
The adolescents are not going to come and say, "Mom or Dad, I'm being beaten by my boyfriend." Adolescents don't often open up to their parents, and so parents may be very unaware of what's happening with their adolescents.
At that time, I had no family and no best friend because they couldn't deal with me being with him anymore. So they said, basically, it's him or me, and I chose him.
After a while, the person who's the victim, the girl, begins to let go of her friendships, let go of the activities she used to enjoy, not feel so close to her parents or her family, spend more time with him, with her boyfriend.
I started to get a little disillusioned about what love should or should not be, and I started to pull away. I started to realize, maybe I am a good person. Maybe I do have a lot of potential. Maybe I just need to realize it. So I talked about going to graduate school, and that was a joke to him. And then in the middle of August, I ended the relationship for good. And he jumped me. He sat on top of me, and a lot of this is very foggy because I kind of escaped at the time mentally. But he sat on top of me, pinned me down, and just started to beat me, screaming at me, closed fist, concentrated on my face, basically. And he's screaming at me all sorts of things. I was a whore, a slut, I didn't love anybody, I wasn't capable of loving him, I was this awful person. He created me. He made me to what I was today, and how dare I take this and walk away after all that he's done for me. We were in the basement, it was all concrete, and he slammed me into the concrete wall a few times. And this time, I don't know what was going on. I was so shocked that he would hit me. Twice. The first time he hit me the first time, it was like in slow motion. I just felt this overwhelming sense of, I just got hit. And I just said to myself, he didn't hit me. He would never hit me. He would never hit me. He loves me. Why would he hurt me? And then he hit me again. And he said to me, "Don't move." And I didn't say anything. By this time, my mouth was so swollen, I couldn't say anything. And he said, "Do you understand me?" And I nodded my head. He said, "If you move, I will put your head through that wall." And he came back, and I didn't move. I don't even think I breathed. And he came back with a pair of scissors, and he cut off all my hair. I had a broken nose, 2 black eyes, pulverized left ear, fractured jaw, He did some damage to my kidneys and may have fractured a couple of ribs. And then it was like this great guy and this evil guy, and if I could just make this evil part go away, he'd be perfect. But I couldn't. It never went away.
The most violent acts in violent relationships occur when the relationship is ending. That's when the abuser sees their control slipping away. This is where we see the most severe injuries occur, and this is where we see most deaths occur in violent relationships.
Dating violence can be lethal. It's a very serious problem. It may not start out looking like a serious problem, but you want to pay attention because statistics show that violence can escalate in a relationship and can become very dangerous. 20% of homicide where women are killed take place on victims who are between 15 and 24 years old. 1 in 3 women who are killed in the United States are killed by a husband or boyfriend. So we know that battering can result in murder.
We have a responsibility as parents to talk with our children, to let them know what the dating world is about. I think we need to let them know that jealousy is not love. We need to let them know that it's not okay to hit one another in a relationship.
I think it's very important that if we're going to communicate with our children about these issues, we must also be willing to hear what it is they have to say. So you need to listen in a non-judgmental way. You need to be prepared to hear things that may be uncomfortable to hear. And you need to be prepared to communicate in a way that is very supportive of what it is that you're hearing, as well as helpful.
Teens don't reach out to us, but they really need our help and support. And they need the help and support they can only get from adults. They rely a lot on their friends, but that's not the kind of support they need when they're in trouble with a violent relationship or some of the serious problems that come along with that. So we have to make the extra effort.
This is not a one-shot deal. This is not something that we can talk about in depth for 2 hours and then say, okay, we've talked about it, and let it go. You need to keep bringing it up.
Young men act like this in violent relationships because they've been socialized to do so. Be careful of the stereotypes that your sons are forming of women. Be very careful of the attitude of, I'm the master of the castle. That's very dangerous. And if they become jealous, they might confuse jealousy with love. That's also very dangerous. We have to teach our sons it's not okay to use aggression to solve our problems.
A real man doesn't hit. A real man listens and discusses and handles problems that come up in a relationship in a healthy way so that nobody feels controlled or afraid. You make a choice. You can choose not to lash out at someone you love when you're upset about something.
We're talking about a crime, and regardless of the age, the batterers need to be held accountable for their actions. And we're finding in many states that teens are being held accountable just like adults are.
Most girls don't think it's going to happen to them. It's not something we expect to happen, especially on the part of somebody that you fall in love with and you think is so terrific. However, it can happen to anyone. There's nothing in particular about you as a teenager, about your daughter, that protects her or that makes it impossible for her to become a victim. All it takes is to fall in love with someone who's willing to use violence.
I think it happens all the time, and I think it happens more than we realize. And parents don't want to see this because abuse doesn't happen to good girls, and abuse doesn't happen to smart girls, but it does.